All patterns of energy are viral in nature, perpetuating forward through time until a force equal or greater with a different pattern encounters intention and changes the original pattern. Feelings and emotions are viral patterns of energy. Statistically speaking, as outlined in the PBS series This Emotional Life, one can predict how depressed a given person will be by their proximity to another depressed person. Intergenerational patterns of both love and abuse, patterns of feeling and relating to feelings, be it overeating or anorexia, are also viral in nature. And what I want to explore in this video is the mechanism behind the viral nature of feelings, emotions, and in a broader sense, all human states of being, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Now, the foundation for understanding the viral nature of feelings is the principle of balance, the principle of symmetry. And the principle of balance says that the more, if you want to kind of imagine a pendulum, a heavy object down at the bottom of a cord, that the more you push the object this way on the cord, the more energy it takes to do so. And eventually, when that energy ceases to exert itself, the more the object swings in the other direction. So if you push something a little bit out of balance, there's a little bit of pressure back into balance. If you push something a lot out of balance, there's a tremendous pressure to come back to center and then to counterbalance in the meantime, meaning that there is a swing to opposites and then a return to balance. That in any group, over time, when strong force is pushing the group into asymmetrical shapes. So what's an asymmetrical shape? One person's eating all the best food, someone else is starving. The symmetrical shape, everyone's equally sharing the labor and equally sharing the fruits of that labor and the food. One person has all of the money and 50% of the people are broke, as opposed to the money being equally shared as needed. You have very little tension in that group. When people, think underwater, if one person has oxygen, you're going scuba diving, you're sharing the oxygen back and forth. You got, one person has all the oxygen, the other has none. You're going to create a violation of violence in the system that is asymmetrical in ways that threaten human life, human needs. You'll get much less of that if it just threatens a preference. I wanted the pink hat and there's only one pink hat. You're going to get some tussle if one person always wears the pink hat. But if one person gets a gallon of the water and the other people get a few teaspoons and you're going on a desert trek, that asymmetry takes more and more energy, more and more fear to suppress. And eventually, the fear of death overcomes the fear of the intimidation by the one drinking all the water, and a mutiny takes place. So there's, the more you push something to one side, the more it ultimately swings to the other. The more cruel a dictator, the more violent the uprising. The more citizens that have been tortured and disappeared, the more likely it is that the dictator will be assassinated, and with little compunction for compassion. So this is an underlying force within the psyche, within physics, within gravity. It's an underlying force to come back to symmetry. Now, if you're a child and your parent is incredibly narcissistic, the parent does not care about the child as a good parent would. Instead, rather than caring about the child, the parent cares about themselves and only cares about themselves, to such an extent that in order to meet the needs to survive, feel secure, experience love and belonging, have self-esteem, to exist in the dependent relationship that is the child with the parent, the child must also care for the parent. So the parent is caring for the parent, and in order to survive, the child cannot care for themselves, must care for the parent. Please the please the parent, satisfy the parent, bribe the parent, meet the needs of the parent, physically, emotionally, sexually. Because narcissistic parents are absorbed in themselves. And so in order to exist, in order to matter in their world, you've got to, in some way, benefit them. Make them look good, make them feel better, something like that. Now, this is incredibly unhealthy for a child at the most vulnerable stage of their life to not get the message that they matter, but get the message that the parent matters, and that is all that matters. That's the message the parent's behavior is sending. That's the message the child's behavior becomes in order to survive. Well, this focus on other gets more and more intense and more out of balance. The child with a narcissistic parent rapidly learns that them having any needs is a threat to their own survival. If the parent wants to do this activity and the child learns that if they say no, the parent hits them or just goes off and leaves them and says, well, I'm doing it on my own because, of course, it's all about me. The child learns that it's dangerous to have their own ideas. It's dangerous to exist. It's dangerous to have preferences. It's dangerous to consider one's own needs. It's all about the parent. Well, we're getting more and more asymmetrical. We're building up an incredible force in which there is a desperate need for that relationship to not only be equal, but to actually be the other way. When you're 2 years old, when you're 5 years old, when you're 8 years old, you need the relationship to be all about you, because that is the time in your life when you are literally dependent on the giants around you to survive. But that's not happening. So it's incredibly lonely, it's incredibly frustrating, it's incredibly painful, it's incredibly scary to realize that your needs at your most vulnerable point in your life don't matter as much as the parents. So you're pushing and pushing. The narcissism of the parent is augmented and enabled by the incredible selflessness of the pleaser and the enabler in the child. And it's the parent saying it's all about me and the child saying, yes, it's all about you. If that's what it takes for me to exist, it's all about you. Now, that's an unsustainable asymmetry. And the more it switches this way, the more invisible, the more worthless, the more lonely, the more hurt the child becomes. Now, the child is doing that under duress. It's moving out of that symmetry in the pendulum under duress. Now, as soon as the narcissistic parent is no more, you leave the house, etc., you've still got maybe a decade or two of imbalanced selflessness that needs to come back into to balance. You've now got to be unusually selfish to balance that out. You've got to pay an unusual amount of attention to who you are to make up all that time. I don't know what I feel. And it's very easy for me to get lost in other people's feelings. So I can't notice what you're feeling. I've got to pay attention to what I'm feeling because I can't figure it out otherwise. I'm too close to this pattern of just surrendering who I am to please the narcissistic abuser. So now I've got to pay all the attention to me or I just get lost again. You see how the pattern repeats? Now someone meets us in this state of recovery and it's like, I don't want to hear your needs. We have become a narcissist to balance the experience of being in a desperately dependent relationship with a narcissist for decades at a really formative period. And our fear is of getting lost there, so we're swinging over here. We're focusing more on us than we would if we had been raised by a generous and healthy parent who was actually focused primarily on the needs of the child and the infant at that period of time when it is absolutely essential for the child to get the message that they will survive because they're okay because they exist. They don't have to make mom look good before they can speak or figure out all. They are loved because they exist. A narcissist cannot do that. It's, I love you if you make me feel good, look good, meet my needs, then I allow you. So the narcissistic parent breeds an initially selfless child who then compensates by being a narcissist once they've broken that relationship, and particularly with their own child. If they go ahead and have a child, maybe their partner is too dominant to accommodate their extreme counterbalance of narcissism. Meaning, I had a narcissistic parent, now it's my turn to be focused all about on myself. Maybe a partner won't put up with that, or jeers, etc., and gives pushback, because who wants to be in a relationship with someone who is completely narcissistic? So they cannot fully express their narcissism, their counterbalance self-absorption. They couldn't do it in childhood. They couldn't do it when they went to work. The government certainly didn't support them in being narcissistic. You've got sociopath after sociopath after sociopath. The boss wants you for your money, your performance. Your parents wanted you for their gratification. Your government wants you to fit in and fit into their various boxes. No one's actually focusing on seeing you. You get into a partner, and if you're all focused on yourself, they're not into that. But then you have a child. And the child cannot run away. The child cannot reject you. The child cannot go anywhere. They're absolutely dependent. And this is the time where the pattern can rebalance, where I will now be the complete center of attention. I will decide, let the kids scream for a while. I'm busy doing my makeup or this or that or the other. And it'll all be about me. And then the balance comes back to center. My parents did this, this, and this that was really horrible to me. And now I do this, this, and this that's really horrible for my child. The center is attained. And the real challenge with emotional, physical, mental disease of all kinds, is when severe trauma and abuse is present and inescapable in childhood, at that time where we are literally dependent on the giants around us. We have no choice but to accept whatever asymmetrical contract of relating is presented to us. And when that's highly out of balance, it takes an enormous willpower to not swing just reactively in the complete opposite direction and become, in essence, the new abuser. Now, social conscience and shame and norms and humiliation and all of that serve as a check in equal power relationships to where it doesn't swing the other way, because, if someone is highly popular, very wealthy, high-ranking, then they've got a lot of people to choose from. So if you say, okay, you're going to take the abuse that I got, because it feels good to come back to center. The energy wants to come back to center. And if it's swung too far this way, it's going to default to swinging too far the other way. But with someone who's high rank and has a lot of options, they're not going to put up with asymmetry. They may ask again for this in order to have access to their rank within the cult. But someone who's helpless, someone who's low ranking, who doesn't have a lot of options, people who are immigrants, people who are unemployed, people who are poor financially, people without the various social connections, they don't have the ability to cause a fear-based check. And when you're dehumanized with narcissistic parents who care about themselves, when you're dehumanized with the constant message that the only reason you don't matter is you have no power. Your humanity doesn't matter. What matters is I've got the power and you don't. You've got to do what I say. Well, now the situation changes. Now I have the power. You've got to do what I say. And what I say is it's time for me to feel good. And what makes me feel good? Dishing out the abuse that was given to me until I come back to center. That's what makes me feel good. For a decade, it was all about him, all about her. Now it's all about me. It's all about me. When that is satisfied, when that energy is discharged and it goes back and forth a little bit and it comes back to center, that's the default place. But often we get stuck in one of these counter moves trying to slow this energy down, and we just don't understand the fact that if you take highly abused people and put them alone with people in a low rank position, the abuse is simply going to transfer to the child, to the student, to the low-ranking official who's thrown under the bus, so that the boss, in government, it's an accepted fact that the political leader who has the most power and who is therefore the most responsible for policy and outcome is the only one who cannot be thrown under the bus. It's perfectly fine to throw 3 aides and fire this person and ruin their reputation and tell lies. to protect the career of the person who actually has more power, more responsibility. It's perfectly fine and acceptable that the parent would punish the child for pointing out the hypocrisy of the parent. Wait a minute, you said we don't eat pie until after dinner, but you're eating pie at 3 in the afternoon. Well, go to your room. Don't talk back to your parents. Because you're actually expecting to have symmetry in the relationship, to be treated with a sense of fairness and equality. And they're not expecting that at all. It's no, I've got the power. I'll do whatever I goddamn want. But you have to do what I say, even if it's unfair, even if it's cruel, even if it's highly narcissistic. So this is, that's how narcissism gets transmitted. Fear, pain, shame, humiliation gets transmitted in the same way. It's a buildup of exposure over here, swinging to over here. If you're happy and you're around 5 people who are depressed, your happiness will bleed out and may lift their depression 5 or 10% for a little bit. But being around 5 depressed people rapidly absorbs your happiness, and what leaches in is their depression. It's a principle of mass. Whatever is the dominant pattern, with the most intensity, with the most people occupying that pattern of energy, tends to change whatever is the minority pattern. It's the phenomena of a pinball colliding with a bowling ball. The bowling ball does not go flying because it's bigger. The parent does not go flying when the child has an emotional state. The child's emotional state goes flying when the parent has an emotional state, thus creating the viral nature of all energy, the viral nature of human states.